Ahoy. Welcome, everybody. It is so good to see you all in spite of the very cold weather. So we need to go shanty. We're going to have we're going to be smoking. Oh, that's nice. It's just always happens. Gracious and loving God, thank you for gathering us here today, and thank you for this time to share together fellowship and friendship, despite how cold it is outside, our love and care and concern for each other. These are for the food that has been provided for us. For the many hands who will fulfill it and serve it. We ask that you make us spiritualities and ask for the continued service. Find over all those we know this day, especially with all those who work in the great house. And welcome also to our folks online. We have a few of them ready. That's terrific. So, a toast to this harvest day for King. Our land acknowledgement today. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which this building is standing is the traditional territory of many nations. We honor and thank the Mississaugas of the New Danish Nordic, the Champlain, the biggest one in the sea, which comprises of the Mohawks, the Unitas, the Onondagas, Oldest, and the Senecas. And we also acknowledge the Huron peoples and many diverse nations, Inuit and Indigenous peoples now living in Canada. This any new language will challenge. So I ask my you to turn your cell phones off as we come upon our speaker. Our speaker today is going to be on Zoom. Our speaker is going to be on Zoom. I haven't forgotten the shanty. And our trivia today, cut and run. As we know, means a hasty departure. This expression dates back to the days of the square-rigged sailing ships when, on occasion, the urgent need to get underway could be anticipated. In preparation, sails were secured to the yards with light rope yarn that could be cut to let the canvas fall quickly, thus enabling the ship to sail at once. Figuratively, one cuts and runs when making unceremoniously and hasty retreats. So who knew that came from sailing? I certainly didn't. And we're going to do the shanty now, Bound for the Rio Grande. So that's on page 4 in your hymnals. Page 4. And I know we're a small group, but let's see if we can build that out. I'm singing a song of the fish of the sea. Oh, Rado, I'll sing you a song of the fish of the sea. Bound for the round of the way down Rio, so fare ye well, my pretty young girl. Bound for the round. Oh, And you who are listening, we're God to you and we're bound for the ride. And way bound, way down Rio, so very well, my lady, we're bound for the ride. She went sailing out of the Rio, and we pointed her nose to the southern star. We're bound for the ride. Way down Rio, so very well, I will be under and bound for the ride. Way down. And she waved her white hand as we passed the surfing. Way down Rio, so very well, my pretty young lad, and bound for the ride. Oh, as we pass the fear, bound for the ride. Way down Rio, so very well, pretty young girl, bound for the ride. Dash and they're all growing green in the southern tree and we're down to the ground. Down the line, so very well, young girl, down to the ground. Thank you. Wow. I couldn't hear you. Were you singing?
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Your table was. Okay. I'm so glad for that. Today we've got David Spencer joining us on Zoom. And I presume we will see him on the screen at one point, will we? Graham. Yes, yes. Okay, let me introduce David. Welcome, David. We're so glad to have you here. David loves absorbing and sharing cruising information, mainly through the Great Lakes Cruising Club, where he serves as Rear Commodore for Georgian Bay, the North Channel, and Canadian Lake Huron. He is also an instructor for the GLCC school. Dave grew up messing about with boats on the Trent Severn Waterway and Georgian Bay. Having retired from his engineering career, he and his wife Kathy now enjoy their summers exploring the hidden gems and popular anchorages of Georgian Bay in the North Channel aboard their Catalina 34 sailboat named Good Idea. Well, there we are. There we have Good Idea on the screen. And David, I shall pass this over to you. And if you folks enjoy this presentation, I think he's doing it again at the boat show.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish I was there in person. It's always better to present in person, but I've been back and forth to Toronto 3 or 4 times this week, and I'm sitting in my home in London taking a rest. But I'll be back in Toronto on Friday, sitting in that very room. Our club is having a dinner for the boat show at the National Yacht Club, exactly where you're sitting. So sorry I can't be there today. Anyway, today we're going to be taking a tour of Georgian Bay, and what I hope to accomplish today is to introduce you to cruising and boating on Georgian Bay. And if you already know Georgian Bay quite well, maybe inform and inspire you a little bit more about some new areas you may want to explore. And what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to be following the small craft route up the eastern shore of Georgian Bay. The small craft route is a buoyed channel suitable for boats up to 65 feet that runs all the way from Port Severn in southern Georgian Bay all the way to Sault Ste. Marie. And today we're going to take a tour that's going to take us along the eastern shore and then along the remote north shore of Georgian Bay. And we're going to end our journey in Killarney. So, docking or anchoring? Well, Georgian Bay has both. but really Georgian Bay is best enjoyed at anchor. That's really the best way to enjoy Georgian Bay. If I can stay off the docks, I'm very, very happy. Cruising on Georgian Bay is pretty easy. It's well covered by chart plotters, no problem there. But I still like the old-fashioned paper charts. I think they're becoming more rare, but they give you a much better perspective about what you're looking at, especially when you're looking at some of the fine detail in among the thousands and thousands of islands along the eastern shore of Georgian Bay. You likely know the eastern shore of Georgian Bay is called the 30,000 Islands, which is a UNESCO World Biosphere Site, one of only a few in Canada. Other resources for Georgian Bay is the Ports Cruising Guide, and this is a new version of the Ports Guide that was just released at the boat show last Saturday. This is a brand new version covering Georgian Bay and the North Channel. And some people like Richardson's, which is a chart book covering all of Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, and the North Channel if you don't have all the paper charts. I'm part of the Great Lakes Cruising Club, and really I'm not trying to sell you anything, but the best source of information for cruising on the Great Lakes is with the Great Lakes Cruising Club. It has just hugely enhanced our enjoyment of the Great Lakes by allowing us to get into areas we would never dream of getting into. And I'll show you some of that as we move through. So what are we going to do? We're going to start in Midland Penetang. And why would we start there? That's because that's where all the marinas are. There are thousands and thousands of boats in the Midland and Penetanguishene area. I have my boat right here at the Midland Bay Sailing Club. And part of the reason there's so many boats there is there are so many nice anchorages nearby. And there's anchorages all over the place, really within an hour or two of Midland and Penetanguishene. Those to the west are part of the Beausoleil First Nation. Three islands there, Hope Island, Beckwith Island, and Christian Island, are all part of Beausoleil First Nation. And if you do anchor there, it's possible that someone from the First Nation may come out and ask for a fee for anchoring. I'm not sure if that's legal or not, but they do it, and it's well worth it if you want to anchor your boat there. Some very attractive spots there. But we're going to start looking right over here in Beausoleil Island. Beausoleil Island is part of the Georgian Bay Islands National Park. Very, very pretty spot, very popular. This picture here is, it's all sailboats at anchor. And the reason for that is I took this picture when our sailing club had a rally at the YMCA camp that's located on Beausoleil Island. But it's usually a nice mixture of sail and power. Hundreds and hundreds of boats can anchor at Beausoleil Island. As I said, it's part of a national park. There's lots of great hiking trails as well. And if you're in a hurry and if you want to have a dock, there are a few docks that are provided by Parks Canada, but the competition for those is pretty fierce. There's also some nice anchorages in the Bone Island area, which is quite close to Beausoleil Island. This is right in the heart of a very exclusive cottage district. So it's rare to find parts or territory that's carved out exclusively for boaters, but it is. And we really enjoy anchoring in this area. Again, it can be busy at times, especially on weekends. Farther up the small craft route, as we get farther away from Midland Penetanguishene, we have an anchorage called Indian Harbor that's behind Bands Island. And it's a really nice spot to anchor. It can be busy. In this picture here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like there's 9 boats at anchor there. And it can probably fit about 12 boats. So 9 is getting pretty full. But it's only about 2.5 hours from Midland and Penetanguishene, which is why it's such a popular anchorage and is usually quite busy on weekends. Heading farther north from Indian Harbor, we come to the mouth of 12 Mile Bay, and it's marked by this beautiful mark at O'Donnell Point. I don't know what it is about these things. It's just a simple steel cylinder that's painted red and white, but it just makes you feel good seeing that. If that wasn't painted red and white, it would be an eyesore, but I think it's really quite attractive, guiding the way in through the hazardous waters at the mouth of 12 Mile Bay. Just north of 12 Mile Bay, we come to a really extraordinary area called the Massasauga. And this is a provincial park that has been overlaid on top of private property. So some of the area is private, but most of it is provincial park. And there's 135 campsites in this provincial park. The special thing about these campsites is that they're water access only. So even something as far south, this is south of Parry Sound, something this far south is a great area for people to go canoeing and really a backpack camping. They've also set aside designated overnight anchorages, and these anchorages are away from cottages and away from campsites. And that's really what we like. We don't want to interfere with the campers. We also don't want to interfere with the cottagers. We're going to look at one of these areas here, which is called Port Rawson Bay. And Port Rawson Bay is an enormous bay, room for lots and lots of boats. Let's have a look at a Google Earth view here. And as we zoom in, we can see a whole bunch of boats at anchor there. I counted 28 boats at anchor there. And it just so happened when the satellites were going over a couple of years ago, Maple Leaf Marinas was having one of their rendezvous there. And so there's 28 boats all rafted up together and they were having all kinds of fun. But if you came around the corner in your boat looking for peaceful anchorage and saw that, you would likely think twice. So Port Rawson is large enough that that anchorage was shown was right over here. There's all kinds of other places you can anchor at Port Rawson. You can anchor there or there or there or up in this bay here and be away from that huge crowd of 28 boats. There's also a couple of other bays, Bear Cove and Shotgun Cove, and I really like Shotgun Cove. This is a picture of Shotgun Cove. Took this picture last year when we had a little Great Lakes Cruising Club rally there. It's an attractive spot, well protected. You can see some rock cliffs here that are characteristic of Georgian Bay. Most of the designated anchorages have a what's called a boaters gathering area. And you can see there's a picnic table here, and there's a nice dinghy dock. You can bring your dinghy right up to shore and tie up to the dock. There's a campfire right here. So these are really well set up for nice social activities for boaters in the Massasauga Provincial Park. I love this picture just leaving Shotgun Cove. This was in early September when the air was cool in the morning, but the water was still nice and warm. So you get that beautiful mist on the water. Moving north out of the Massasauga, we're going to leave Port Rawson and we're going to head up into the Long Sault area. And when we head up into the Long Sault, we have an opportunity to branch off and head in towards Parry Sound if we want to do that. We're not going to do that today. We're not going to explore Parry Sound. There's too many other neat places to look at. As we head toward Long Sault, we're going to go past Frying Pan Island. And the reason that I've highlighted Frying Pan Island is it's the home of a boat inn restaurant called Henry's Sans Souci or Henry's Fish and Chips. And Henry's is the home of the $375 plate of fish and chips. So what do you get for $375? Well, you get a plate of fish and chips, but you also get a plane ride. Georgian Bay Airways, which is now I think called Lake Country Airlines, will fly you from Parry Sound, take a scenic tour over the beautiful Massasauga Provincial Park and some of the other terrain around there, land you at Henry's. You can get off, have your fish and chips, get back on the plane, and they'll fly you back to Parry Sound. I've never done that, but it sounds like a cool thing to do if you have $375 you don't know what to do with. Heading farther north, we're into the Long Sault area, and this is a really attractive area. Lots and lots of cottages there, and the Island Queen tour boat runs out of Parry Sound, looking at some of the natural splendor and also at some of the beautiful cottages that are on some of the islands around Long Sault, on the west side of Parry Island, and all around Parry Sound. Some really attractive spots. Georgian Bay would be beautiful if there were no cottages there, but most of the cottages in Georgian Bay are really attractive and fit the landscape beautifully. So the Long Sault area is shown right here in this archipelago of islands, and they're all cottage or all water access cottages. but there are some good places to anchor nearby as well. We were anchored over here um, 2 years ago, and we were just heading out in between the gap in between a couple of the islands, and we were blocked. It looked like there was a tree or something that had fallen and had drifted into that gap. Well, it wasn't a tree. It was a bear. And so we waited until the bear finished swimming across, and he gives us a look at that dirty look he's given us. He is not happy that I had interrupted his swim, and he scampers up on the island and takes off. The reason I'm showing you this is not to scare anyone. Bears are much more scared of us than we are of them, but these are all a whole bunch of fairly small islands, fairly far out in Georgian Bay, and a bear would probably have to swim at least a mile to make it out to these islands. And there's no way that these islands, let me just go back a couple. There's no way that these islands over here are large enough to support a bear. So he likely swam over from Perry Island and messed around in these islands, and then before I saw him swimming right here. Okay, so we're now going to leave the Long Sault and head up to Kilcorsi Bay, which is surrounded by Killbear Provincial Park. No bears here, but Kilcorsi Bay, as I said, is surrounded by Killbear, which is a very popular provincial park. There's 880 campsites at Killbear, absolutely enormous park. And on a nice warm summer weekend, this place takes on a festive air like a Caribbean island. Really a fun place to be, great social activities. Not a place to be if you want to be on your own or if you're looking for peace and quiet, but a fun place to anchor, easy to get in and out. This is a picture of us leaving the anchorage at Kilcorsi Bay a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to highlight there's 4 buoys here, and these 4 buoys mark a designated anchorage. And the idea is that in order to avoid interfering with any of the canoeing or sailing that some of the people at Killbear Provincial Park may be doing, that we would anchor inside that designated anchorage. But if you look, you'll see all the boats that they're not anchored in there. And the reason is that it's over 50 feet deep in that designated anchorage, far too deep for anchoring. So most of the boats, including me, anchor along the periphery of the anchorage where it's 15 or 20 feet deep, which is much more reasonable for anchoring. So we're leaving Kilcorsi Bay now, and we're continuing our journey north, and we're going to head past Franklin Island, which is just north of Parry Sound. There's a couple of ways you can go. You can go on either side of Franklin Island. One is protected, one is not. There are 2 nice spots to anchor there in Regatta Bay and Shark Bay. But one of the highlights of this journey is this lighthouse right here, the Snug Island Lighthouse. This is actually more properly referred to as a range. This is the back range mark for the freighters that come into Parry Sound from off of Georgian Bay. Really a pretty range mark on beautiful territory. We're leaving Franklin Island now and sailing up the beautiful Shawanaga Inlet. And this is 6 or 8 miles of really attractive cruising. We have a sailboat, and usually the wind is from the west. And if the wind is from the west, it blows over Shawanaga Island there and gives us a nice breeze without worrying about the waves. So we've had some just gorgeous sails there. Lots of nice places to anchor around Shawanaga. But they get scarcer as you head north. This area here is Point a Barrel, and Point a Barrel is a popular cottage district. Most of the cottages are water access cottages, but it's a very old cottage area and a very popular area, and some beautiful cottages there. In addition, again, to the natural splendor, it's nice running by some of these cottages. Some of them are 100 years old or more. Many of them have been in families for generations. This is quite a large cottage. It's relatively new. That was built in about 2020 or 2021. But as we leave the Point of Barrel area, we come to, again, a very attractive lighthouse. The Point of Barrel Lighthouse guides boats in, and it's all small craft because ships certainly cannot make it into Point of Barrel, but guides small craft in from the hazardous or through the hazardous reefs that guard Point of Barrel from Georgian Bay. And if you're wondering, yes, there is a barrel on Point of Barrel. So where are we? How are we doing on our journey here? Well, we've come about 65 miles or so up to Point of Barrel, but we've got a long way to go, so let's keep moving. I don't want to bore you too much with charts, but have a look at that chart here. This is the 30,000 island area, and I swear there's 25,000 of those islands are in this chart. This is a really complex area for boating. You really have to have your wits about you. And this is why I like the paper charts, is they give you a much better perspective as to what's going on. So there's the channel, the narrow channel where you enter the Point of Barrel Cottage area, marked by the Point of Barrel Lighthouse. And from here, we can head out into open water in Georgian Bay. However, there is a protected passage called the Hangdog Channel that runs through here about 8 or 10 miles into Alexander Passage. And let's have a look at what that channel has in store for us. Look at that Google Earth view. Unfortunately, the Google Earth satellite split the view right where I really wanted to show you, but somebody somehow found a way to find a passage for boats through this very rocky and very hazardous area. And the rocks are all very low lying. This picture looks a little more ominous than it should. I took this picture when it was raining, so it looks a little bit dark and foreboding, but it really is pretty. But you can see how featureless it is without some marks, and there's a buoy there guiding us into the Hangdog Channel. Without buoys, you'd be in big trouble. And all of those low-lying islands, they aren't just above the water. Think of that whole type of topography 2 or 3 feet under the water. And our boat draws 4.5 feet, so you really want to pay attention to the buoys as you're making your way through the Hangdog Channel, or else you'll run into grief. Georgian Bay is very unforgiving, rocks everywhere. That's a better picture with the sun shining instead of the rain. And I'm sorry about the blurriness of this picture showing these buoys here. I think my hand was shaking as we came up to this narrow passage. There are 9 aids to navigation in about a quarter mile. There's 7 of them shown in this picture, and 2 of them are behind me. And when you look at it, as you come up to it, you swear that there was some sort of an accident where a helicopter was carrying these buoys and they just accidentally dropped them in the water and they just fell willy-nilly. But if you pay attention to the charts and you pay attention to your navigation skills, this is the safest way through this passage. And 55-foot boats have made it through here. It's easy for us to get our 34-footer through, but 55-foot boats have made it through here as well. After the Hangdog Channel, we make it into Alexander Passage. And Alexander Passage is very similar to Point of Barrel, although I'd say the cottages are not quite as grand. They're all water access cottages, very attractive. They look very homey. They look like very homey places, and you can see people out canoeing and sailing and just enjoying the beautiful water in Alexander Passage. Lots and lots of really neat cottages, but by far the most photographed cottage is this one. And this is a really interesting place. I'm not sure what the idea is behind it. Very modern looking. Without windows, they're really missing some beautiful views, but everybody that passes by takes a picture of this cottage and as they're heading past Alexander Passage. So we're now leaving Alexander Passage and we're on our way up to Byng Inlet. And at Alexander Passage, you get thrown out into Georgian Bay. There is no protected passage between Alexander Passage and Byng Inlet. So you have to head out into the exposed water of Georgian Bay for about 10 nautical miles. And it's well buoyed, but it's fairly shallow. There's spots there where it's only about 10 or 12 feet. And if there's any kind of a sea running, it can make for a fairly choppy and uncomfortable voyage, especially if you get into 3 or 4 foot waves. And if you draw 5 or 6 or 7 or even 8 feet, it can be very, very uncomfortable in that channel. So sometimes what we do is we'll just head offshore. And you need to head north, stay off the Magnetawan ledges that are right here, and then follow the shipping route into Point of Barrel. I'm sorry, into Byng Inlet. And as you get into Bing Inlet, you definitely don't need to worry about touching bottom in Bing Inlet. Bing Inlet is buoyed for ships. I don't really know why ships go in there. I think it's related. There's a rail crossing there and uh, some kind of a rail terminal there. So I think the ships have something to do with the rail line there, but I have no idea why a ship would go in there. But it's 25, 30 feet deep all the way through Bing Inlet. Lots of cottages and private properties along Bing Inlet. Again, it's just a beautiful mix of natural scenery and some attractive buildings through there, including this kind of cool place. Um, it's right near the mouth of Bing Inlet. The reason most people go into Bing Inlet, at least the reason I go into Bing Inlet, is to get to the marinas. Because by the time we've come this far north, we need fuel, we need water, we need to have our boat pumped out. And there's two marinas there. One is Wright's Marina, which is likely the most popular, and the second is St. Amant's Marina. And we usually go to St. Amant's mainly because there's a grocery store there right on the water and an LCBO store there, so we can stock ourselves back up with beer and wine and so on for our journey into Northern Georgian Bay. As we head farther up into Bing Inlet, surprisingly, there's a really nice place to anchor. There's no cottages around. You can see the rail bridge right here, and this is a very, very busy railway. I'd say every 15 or 20 minutes there's a train heading north, and I was concerned that it would be waking us up all night, but overnight there are very few trains. Um, I think I was wakened up maybe once or twice about 1:30 in the morning and again at about 4 o'clock by trains going by, but it's kind of a nice, frankly, a bit of a romantic sound. You hear the rumbling of the train and you just sort of wake up and realize where you are and fall back asleep again. So Bing Inlet's a really nice place with all the facilities you need for cruising boaters to get all the supplies they need to head into Northern Georgian Bay. We're going to leave Bing Inlet now and the attractive lighthouse, and this is the Giroux Island Coast Guard Station. And there's a Coast Guard Zodiac based here, and they take care of mariners in trouble in Northern Georgian Bay. I love it when that Zodiac is tied up at the dock there because it means that no one's in trouble. But they're always there, and the nature of the job means they have to go out in nasty weather, and they're always ready to do that. Canadian Coast Guard is fantastic. I've never had to use their services. Hope I never have to, but those who have needed them have really been appreciative of the work that they do. So we're going to leave Bing Inlet, and one thing that a lot of boaters do is just head straight across to Killarney. It's an open water run of about 38 miles. We're not going to do that. We're going to stick with the small craft route and head up into Northern Georgian Bay. And this is among the most remote areas you'll find on the Great Lakes, short of Lake Superior. There are no docks, there's no provisioning, there's no power, there are very few cottages and very few boats along the small craft route. So let's head up there and see what we have in store. One of the things I like to do when I'm exploring a new area is have a look on Google Earth and just kind of see what the terrain looks like, and is it forested, is it rocky, what's it look like? And I saw this strange configuration here. It almost looked like a subdivision, and that would be very strange. I don't know, is there development there? Nope, not development. They're all wind turbines. And in 2018 and 19, Henvey Inlet First Nation constructed about 87 wind turbines on their territory. Um, these are absolutely enormous structures. The hub height is 132 meters and the rotor diameter is 136 meters. Each one of those puts out 3 megawatts of power. So these can generate a tremendous amount of power and generate a tremendous amount of income for Henvey Inlet First Nations. Unfortunately, when they were being built in 2018, one of the pieces of equipment they were using caught fire, and that fire spread. And it turned out to be a fairly significant forest fire in 2018, burning 113 square kilometers. And I was in my boat and I took a picture right there, not during the fire, but several years after the fire. And I'll show you what the damage looks like. And it really is quite shocking what a forest fire can do. It can take some of the beautiful, pristine scenery that we're used to in this area and making it really look apocalyptic. I'll show you that picture in a few minutes as we get up to this area. But leaving Bing Inlet, we get up to a place called Laramie Bay. And I really like to anchor here. If you look carefully at that chart, though, you'll see there's no soundings. All kinds of rocks in this area. How on earth are you ever going to make it in there? Well, this is where the Great Lakes Cruising Club comes in, and a lot of our members have gone and taken soundings, allowing us to get into areas that other boaters can't get into. So you can see the soundings on that chart to the right. So you can plot a course on the CHS chart to the left and find yourself all by yourself in a really, really pretty anchorage. You can be almost assured no one else will get in there who would be crazy enough to venture through the rocks without proper charts. But if you have the charts that our club has, you can find a really cool spot in there. If you look off the cockpit, off the stern of my boat that's anchored there, you do see the windmills that are really quite close to this anchorage. But who wants to look at the land? I enjoy looking out over Georgian Bay, over the sunsets and the thousands and thousands of really attractive islands over Georgian Bay. As we move north from Laramie Bay along the small craft route, we come to a very narrow passage here called Rogers Gut. And what a terrible name. Um, about 35 or 40 years ago, this small craft route went on the other side of the island like so, and I like the name of this passage much better. This passage is called Free Drinks Passage, which is a way better name than Rogers Gut, but we're stuck with Rogers Gut, so we'll call it Rogers Gut. And Rogers Gut is really quite narrow and quite shallow, and it is intimidating for some boats. But if you don't draw more than 6 feet, you can easily make it through there. Right close to Rogers Gut, which is right there, is the Henvey Inlet First Nation and the body of water called Henvey Inlet right here. And there are a couple of anchorages that our club has charted out. One of them is here, and one of them is here. We'll just have a look at what those look like. This is the first one that I identified, and it's fine. We anchored there for 3 or 4 days, and we're very happy. You can see a couple of these wind turbines that are in sight. They're not bothering us, not bothering anybody. We made our way over to the other anchorage, though, and that's what it looks like. The fire damage is just terrible. And I took this picture in 2023, and the fire was in 2018. So even after 5 years of recovery, that's what it looks like. So it is going to be a long, long time before that fire, pardon me, before that forest is back to its pristine beauty. So we have followed the small craft route up from Bing Inlet. And what have I shown you? I've shown you narrow passages. I've shown you windmills. I've shown you forest fire damage. I don't mean to make it sound like an ugly passage because it really is very pretty, but some people may prefer to not take the small craft route and head offshore. And that's what we do sometimes. Being a sailboat, we can't really sail on the small craft route, but if the winds are right, we can sail up from Bing Inlet by taking the outside passage. And again, you really need your wits about you. This area here from the water looks perfectly smooth, but underwater, 3, 4 feet underwater, there's just a forest of rocks. And if a boat were to venture in there, you would certainly come to grief. So we're now in the extreme northeast corner of Georgian Bay. You can't go any farther north and you cannot go any farther east than this corner where Key Harbor is located. We're going to have a quick look at the Pickerel River, and we'll look at Fox Island as well. And the Pickerel River is very difficult to access. Again, the Great Lakes Cruising Club has provided soundings allowing people to venture in there and have a really, really attractive anchorage all to yourself. But Imagine sitting in my boat there and looking off the stern. That is the view off the stern. Again, a little bit apocalyptic looking. There's a cottage here that was saved in the fire, but the rest of the forest is very, very badly damaged. We'll now look at Fox Island and the Fox Bay area. And if you look at this chart, there's not a sounding to be found. There's white showing deep and blue showing shallow, but other than that, who knows how deep it is? Well, our club has gone in and taken soundings in these areas, allowing us to enjoy these areas. They don't expect you to be able to read all those soundings, but every one of those red marks is a sounding that somebody took. And that somebody is could have been Jim Wool. And Jim is one of our great explorers who's shown here with his handheld depth sounder. You head out with a handheld depth sounder and a notepad and really create extremely useful charts, allowing those of us lucky enough to have access to them to get into some pretty cool areas. Now, I mentioned to you that I was going to show you a picture of that island that was on fire with all the smoke, and this is that spot that I highlighted with the arrow. This is in the Fox Island area. Very severe damage. Again, that's 5 years after the fire burned. You can see most of these pine trees were growing right out of the rock. Not great growing conditions, so it takes them a long, long time to grow, and it will take a long, long time to recover. And I promise you that's the last depressing picture I'll show you. Most of the Fox Island area is absolutely gorgeous. Just pristine, beautiful forest, sparkling waters, rocky islands, a really neat spot. And Kathy and I have enjoyed anchoring in this area for many years. Just as we swing around here, this gap right here is how we get in. But this spot right here is our favorite place to anchor literally anywhere in the world. Now, unfortunately, as the water levels are dropping slightly in Georgian Bay, last year we touched bottom as we were going in, and the water level is going to be even lower this year. So we'll likely have to wait for the water to recover before we can return to our favorite anchorage. But great opportunities to hop in your dinghy and explore the literally hundreds of miles of channels, um, totally unoccupied, no cottages, no inhabitants, lots of good blueberry picking, great spots to just pull up ashore and have a picnic on the shoreline. A little bit farther north is the Obstacle Island area, and there's a very narrow passage here called the Parting Channel, and this is really a neat place. I parked my dinghy on the shore there and climbed up on shore to take a picture of it. Doesn't look too bad from shore, but when you're down in the water, it really looks intimidating, and that island truly is an obstacle. The common wisdom is you really don't want to be any more than 40 feet if you go through here. However, I've got a friend who goes through here every year just to prove a point in his 46-foot boat. And this is sped up, but this is my friend Bill and Donna a couple of years ago coming through this area. And it's a little bit jerky and sped up, but you can see how tight it is getting through here.
Yay.
And then at the end, he just does a spinorama just to show off even more. So Bill and Don are a fun couple, and he's never hurt himself yet going through there. So I know he went through last year as well. From here, we get to the Bustard Islands in the Bad River area. So Obstacle Island, where we just saw that trick of the boat going through the narrow passage, is right here, and this is the French River outlet, and this is the spot where Samuel de Champlain was the first European to set eyes on Georgian Bay. He called it La Mer Douce, I believe, the Sweetwater Sea. And there's a rock right up here, right by that red arrow that I stand on. And I picture Samuel de Champlain standing on that rock with the First Nations people gazing out over this gorgeous scene. And what I saw standing on that rock is almost exactly what Samuel de Champlain would have seen in 1615. So there's the Bustard Islands and there's Bad River. We'll have a quick look at these two spots to anchor. The Bustard Islands have this famous lighthouse arrangement. Actually, it's a range arrangement called the Three Sisters. And two of the lighthouses line up to provide passage or safe guidance out the French River. And two of the lighthouses line up to provide safe guidance to keep you off the rocks along the north shore of Georgian Bay. And there is a nice spot to anchor in there. Um, it's not great for holding though. If the wind is blowing, this is not a place to be. It's a bit of a slippery bottom. And there's a few, although it's part of a provincial park, there are a few cottages in here. Some of them are quite attractive, but some of them aren't. Um, so the Bustards is not my favorite place to be. Some people enjoy it. But if I was to anchor in this area, I'd likely go into Bad River. And the Bad River is just opposite the Bustards. It's on the mainland. Again, part of the French River Provincial Park. Uh, Very popular place to anchor. This is something I'm sure you've heard of the Great Loop and loopers that make a journey up the east coast of the United States and through the Great Lakes, then down through the Tennessee and the Tenn-Tom waterway down to Mobile, Alabama. Many loopers really feel they've made it when they get to Bad River. One of the attractive things about Bad River is to get through what's called the Devil's Door, and then you're into some fantastic dinghying areas. Let's have a look at Google Earth again, and the anchorage is shown to the right, and you can just see all these fantastic waterways that have been carved into the rock over hundreds of thousands of years. And it's just like it's like a water park for grown-ups without all the safety features. You really do need to keep your wits about you here, and it is easy to get lost. All the rocks start to look the same, but it's a really great place to take your dinghy or your kayak, and make sure you take a chart and take a picnic and your swimsuit as well, and you can just have a wonderful time up uh, in the dinghying areas off Bad River. So from the Bad River area, the small craft route again has no protected passage as we head over toward Beaverstone Bay and Philip Edward Island. You're thrown out into about 16 miles of open water from the Bustards to Beaverstone Bay, and this can be a challenging passage. The prevailing winds are west and southwest, and this is right along the north shore of Georgian Bay, so you really want to pick your time when you make that passage. From here, you can head straight to Killarney, but that's the easy way out. We're not going to take the easy way out. We're going to, pardon me, we're going to head into Beaverstone Bay and along the beautiful passage called Collins Inlet. But before that, we're going to have a look at a couple of anchorages. There's one anchorage in particular called Cross Bay that's a really neat spot just before you get into Beaverstone. So here's a small craft route showing your way into Beaverstone Bay, and here is Cross Bay. And if you look at it, again, it's tinted blue, so it's shallow, but there's not a sounding to be found there. And this is not an advertisement for the Great Lakes Cruising Club, but our members have sounded a safe passage into there. The way you get in there, instead of following the small craft route into Beaverstone Bay, is you depart the small craft route at the Rooster Reef mark right here and head toward Hamilton Island right over here. And the reason you want to head toward Hamilton Island and not straight to Cross Bay is to keep you off this hazard here. This is an island charted at 2 feet above chart datum. But with the water normally a meter or so above chart datum, this is lurking about a foot underwater. And this hazard is called sly boots. I just think that's a very mischievous sounding name for what could otherwise be quite a nasty thing to run into in your boat. So Cross Bay is really pretty. Only room for one or two boats in there. But if you hop in your dinghy, Lots of great dinghy exploration. You'll also find lots of canoers. Uh, Philip Edward Island and this whole area is part of or is adjacent to Killarney Provincial Park, and there's lots and lots of campsites. So it's a very popular place for canoeing. Frankly, it's better water for canoes than it is for sailboats like mine because a lot of the water you're in is only 2 or 3 feet deep. But you'll find lots of people canoeing and lots of campsites, and they're very friendly. They're keen to find out about our boat and how we got there, and we're keen to chat with them about how long they're camping for. So Cross Bay is a really cool area. But we'll now follow the small craft route into Beaverstone Bay, and there's a couple of nice anchorages there. But most people are concerned about Beaverstone Bay because it leads into Collins Inlet, and you can see how shallow it is here. You see the blue tint on the chart. That generally indicates water you don't want to be in. There is a narrow buoyed passage through there. Um, you can see the picture of the buoys there. Uh, and the water is only about 6 or 7 feet deep. This is the only place in Georgian Bay where I'm not concerned about running aground. The water is very loose silt or weed, and I've had my depth sounder flash 2.5 feet at me, and you just keep going. It's just weed and silt stirred up, and I've never heard of anyone running aground here, but it is nerve-wracking for some if you don't know the area. And just make your way through the Boyd Passage and haul to port into Collins Inlet. And Collins Inlet is a really attractive, perfectly protected passage. Gorgeous cruising, about 12, maybe 14 nautical miles from the east end of Beaverstone Bay to the west end at the Flat Rock Mark. Really, really attractive territory. There's maybe a handful of cottages, all off-grid cottages, all water access cottages, of course, that are nestled among the trees in this passage. But generally, it's completely wild and really attractive with gorgeous scenery, cliffs, trees, rocks, water. Really, really nice. Until you make it to the west end of Collins Inlet, and one of those strangely attractive um, painted pillars. And again, I don't know what it is. Maybe is it only me that finds those things very attractive and kind of alluring? Again, if it was just a rusted steel cylinder, it wouldn't look like anything, but painted up like a navigation mark, it's really attractive to me. Right near the west end of Collins Inlet is another great anchorage called Thomas Bay. And Thomas Bay has these gorgeous pink rocks behind it. They're all, almost all of them have a pink tint. And in the early morning and in the late evening, when the sun is shining on them at the right angle, it really lights up beautifully. So another view of how pink the rocks are there. Very, very attractive. Popular place to anchor. And oh, there's a bear sitting there. He's just sitting in Thomas Bay, gazing out at us, wondering if we are have anything for him. Um, there are lots of bears around, and as I said, they are far more scared of us than we are of them. Couple of pictures of, or a picture of a few boats anchored in Thomas Bay. A few years ago, there was a cottage constructed in Thomas Bay that somewhat makes it a less attractive spot to anchor. But if you anchor over in this area here, you're out of view of the cottage, and the cottage is out of your sight. Cottage owners are very friendly. They'll likely come out in their boat and stop by and say hello. They know where they built their cottage. They know that it's a popular anchorage, and they're very welcoming to boaters that choose to anchor there. So we're going to leave Thomas Bay now and head down to Ojig Island. And this, unfortunately, is still called Squaw Island on some charts. Squaw is kind of a derogatory term, and the name of the island was changed many years ago to Ojig Island in honor of Daphne Ojig, who's a First Nations artist from Manitoulin Island. And Kathy and I have seen her art hanging in the National Gallery in Ottawa, and it was kind of neat to see her art there where we've anchored at her namesake island. And it's a really attractive spot. I've dressed ship here. This was on Canada Day a few years ago, so When else is a good time to dress ship except on Canada Day? And you can see this really attractive elm tree over here. That elm tree is home to an eagle's nest that has been active for several years. So at the right time of the season, you can sit in your cockpit and watch the eagles fly back and forth to feed their young. Really a neat place to be. One morning we got up quite early because we were meeting friends in Killarney for breakfast. We got up about 5:30, and that was our view when we got up. The sun comes up quite early in June and July. That's likely about 5:45 in the morning. And that picture to me just looks like something you'd see on an African safari or something like that, with that distinctive elm tree. I think I called it an oak tree. It's an elm tree marking the entrance to Ojig Island. So from Ojig Island, we're going to head up to Killarney, and Killarney is guarded by the Red Rock Lighthouse. And you can see some of the pink rocks there, really attractive spot. But the lighthouse is only the second most impressive things that you'll see at the entrance to Killarney. The Viking
Whoa.
cruise ship has built a couple of adventure ships. This is the Octantis that is sitting off Killarney, and they take tenders or dinghies into Killarney to participate in some of the activities in Killarney. This ship is 600 feet long. I don't know how many guests it accommodates, quite a few, I think. And in the summer, it runs all around the Great Lakes. Right now, the Octantis is in Antarctica, so it's an sort of an exploration ship that Viking cruise ships built to explore Antarctica in the winter, in our winter, and in our summer, it cruises between Toronto and Chicago mainly, I think. I think it might make one trip to into Lake Superior and Duluth, Minnesota, in that area, maybe even Thunder Bay. But it's a common sight in the Killarney area. Killarney is really it's surrounded, or it's centered on this channel. Um, Killarney is a water-based community. There wasn't even a road into Killarney until 1964. So it really is a water-based area, and the channel in Killarney can be a very active spot. You can see there's a float plane here. On my picture here on Zoom, it's partially blocked, but right here we have a tour boat that comes from Little Current on Manitoulin Island, and it runs about 25 miles from Little Current to Killarney. With passengers, they get off, walk around Killarney, and then get back on. This boat over here is on one of the mooring balls, and these boats right here are tied up to the docks at Killarney Mountain Lodge. Lots of things to do in Killarney. One of the most famous things to do is to eat at Herbert's Fish and Chips. And the fish and chips that you eat, or at least the fish you eat at Herbert's, that fish was swimming about 3 or 4 hours before you ate it. Really, really good fish and chips there. Also, I think this is kind of a cool picture, the LCBO with a dock. The dock's intended for boats, but if you got a float plane, why not? If you're looking for some luxury, Killarney Mountain Lodge is a wonderful place to stay. It's really a high-end resort that was bought maybe about 8 or 10 years ago by a fairly wealthy man, actually from my city. He invented a product and ended up selling the product for tons of money. And he absolutely loves Killarney and has put tens of millions of dollars into Killarney Mountain Lodge and another lodge in Killarney called the Sportsman's Inn. There's no way he's going to get his money out of it, but he just loves Killarney. So if you're looking for um, some luxurious accommodations after roughing it in Northern Georgian Bay for a week or so, Killarney Mountain Lodge is the place to be. But Killarney is the end of our journey for tonight. Killarney marks the eastern boundary of the North Channel. And if you ever got me talking about the North Channel, I'd be here till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So that's the end of our journey for today. Uh, Hopefully you can tell I enjoy talking about this stuff. If you have any questions about Georgian Bay or the North Channel or the Great Lakes Cruising Club, feel free to contact me, and With that, I'll hand it back to Diane. And Diane, thanks so much for inviting me to speak here. I love talking about this stuff. I'd much rather be looking you in the eye than talking to you over Zoom, but that's where we are for today. So thanks very much. And I think I'm right on noon, which is I never want to get between, I never want to be speaking before somebody's lunch. So I think we're spot on time for lunch.
Sounds really good. Thank you so much, David. Good round of applause. That was fascinating. Makes one want to hop into a boat and just head up there. Are there any questions or comments that anybody has for David? Jim?
Thank you for an absolutely marvelous talk. It's like having sailed up there for over 20 years, there were places there that I didn't get to, and it's nice to see them. And also, you didn't comment on the fish farms up there that I discovered, and as where you said that the fish is fresh and Kalani. There was a comment several years ago about when the oceans are rising, that the Great Lakes water would be rising. But you said it had dropped some, and I was just wondering if you had any comments about that. And again, thank you again for a marvelous talk.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of water levels, the Great Lakes water varies from year to year. We have chart datum, and you're all mariners, and you know what chart datum is. Several years ago, I think it was 2021. I think it was 2021. The water was about 1.54 meters above chart datum. And some of the docks at Killarney Mountain Lodge that I was showing you, they were actually underwater. They had to build platforms on tops of the dock, on top of the fixed docks to accommodate the water. And then in 2013, that was one of the more recent low water marks where the water was about 0.4 meters below chart datum. So there is, from year to year, there is a natural swing of water levels. It really isn't related to the ocean levels. This is all upstream of the ocean. And, you know, if you dumped all the water in the Great Lakes in the ocean would go up like a, 16th of a millimeter or something like that. It's really a relatively small amount of water that the Great Lakes feeds the ocean. So rising ocean levels does not affect the levels in the Great Lakes, but the Great Lakes do not hold a constant water level from year to year. It varies from year to year, and there's some excellent resources. Most of the best resources actually are from Canada, but there's some good resources in the United States that keeps track of that and does forecasts based on forecast rainfall and ice cover and so on. For example, this year being, at least this week, being quite cold, this is great because as the when the Great Lakes are iced over, they can't evaporate. So that gives a better chance for the water to not escape into the sky and gives us more water for boating. But thanks for your question about the water levels. The short answer is, maybe it's too late for a short answer. This is now a long answer. But the short answer is the Great Lakes vary in depth from year to year, vary according to chart datum from year to year. And I don't really think that changing water levels in the ocean have anything to do with that. Now, I'm not a meteorologist, and I'm certainly not a climate scientist, but that's my view.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Ron.
So obviously a great consideration in all of the cruising through that area has to do with avoiding the bottom. And I'm wondering what a comfortable draft of vessel is for that type of area.
Yeah, I would say I draw 4.5 feet. I have a friend with a boat that draws 8 feet. And with a few exceptions, my friend with the 8-foot boat can go everywhere I can go. I mentioned a couple of spots that were shallow. I mentioned that Rogers Gut area. And again, sorry about the name, that's just what it's called. That would not be a place I would go with an 8-foot draft vessel, but there is a bypass around it. I showed you how you could head out into open water and get around the Rogers Gut shallow spots. There's one or two other shallow spots as well. Uh, you know, I'm happy to talk to you maybe offline about what those might be, but almost any draft boat will be fine. I would say for comfort, if you are less than 6.5, 7 feet, you can go pretty much anywhere.
Since I have an island in Georgian Bay that's not out in the open, there's often sessions. When the west wind blows, it can be as much as a foot higher than it was an hour ago. And if the east wind is blowing, it can be a foot lower than it used to be. So if you're close, watch the wind.
Absolutely right, George. Great observation. The sessions are something that is fairly predictable with the wind. But yeah, you're right. You'd hate to sneak into an anchorage with only a foot under your keel, and then find an east wind comes up and all the water all the water blows out, and
Yeah,
you're stuck there till spring.
yeah, you're sitting on your anchor.
All right.
Thank you, George. And here we have Philip.
Thank you very much for a delightful discussion of Northern Georgian Bay. I was impressed by the number of interesting names of the islands and places up there. In southern Ontario, we think of that area as being very remote and hardly having had time to be named. Have you any comments on the naming of the various islands and bays there?
I think a lot of it is they're sort of locally named, and then they just become the official name. I don't know that anybody counted 30,000 islands in the 30,000 islands area, but certainly not all of them are named. There are some names that aren't terribly imaginative. For example, I'm within a very short distance, about maybe 30 or 40 nautical miles between Northern Georgian Bay and the North Channel. There are not one, not two, but three Fox Islands. And, Fox Island isn't named after, Lady Fox of such and such who came over from England in 1740. It's probably because somebody saw a fox there one day. So a lot of the islands, if you look into the names, and that there is, my friend had an old document about some of the naming history of some of the spots. And some of the names were interesting, but most of them really weren't all that terribly interesting. Fox Island, okay, good name. Pickerel River, I wonder why they called it Pickerel River. Obstacle Island, well, you can see that picture I showed with that obstacle making navigation tough through there. So there are some really interesting names, but I wouldn't read too much into them. At least I shouldn't say that. It would be a fun thing to study, and I've studied it a little bit, but not very much. That'd be kind of a neat thing to look into as to where some of the names came from.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have a couple of comments. One, my husband and I, many years ago, were able to go to stay at Killarney Mountain Lodge with a ham radio course. And it was not that expensive at the time. So I presume things have changed quite a lot with the new ownership and the upgrading. But my question is about the Great Lakes Cruising Club. I presume you can access it online.
Yes, I'm not here. I'm here. I'm happy to talk about the Great Lakes. I'm not here to try to sell anything. But the Great Lakes Cruising Club is a club of about 2,500 people spread across the United States and Canada, who really just love cruising the Great Lakes. And our main purpose is sharing information. And some of those harbor reports that are referred to in some of the unsounded areas is the main reason why most people join the Great Lakes Cruising Club. If you're interested in joining, we'd love to have you. It's at glcclub.com. And right across the street from where you are, the boat show is on now. So we have a discount for people joining during boat show season. Membership is 160 American dollars per year. And for new members, it's normally a $90 initiation fee. And this year, for the first time ever, there's no initiation fee. Most of our information is restricted to club members because people do pay a fairly significant amount to have access to it. But I found it very worthwhile, and it's just hugely increased my enjoyment of cruising Georgian Bay in the North Channel.
So if anybody is wanting to do that, that would be certainly an asset to them to have membership with the club. And so you would have charts and things on your website?
Yes, we've got about 1,000 harbor reports for all of the Great Lakes. Just by way of history, the Great Lakes Cruising Club was founded in 1934, and it was founded by 8 or 10 fairly wealthy yachtsmen. And they were fairly wealthy because in 1934 you had to be wealthy to have a boat, and they were yachtsmen because they were men. And they would take their wooden ships and cruise around the North Channel and Northern Georgian Bay without any charts, without any GPS, no depth sounders, no instruments. They had a compass and a lead line. And they would find some of these neat places. And then over the winter, they would retire to their private club in St. Louis or Chicago or wherever they were and share their notes as they were sipping on brandy. And those notes became the first harbor reports. And of course, now they're all online, and we've got about 1,000 of them covering all 5 Great Lakes.
David, thank you so much. Let's give him another lovely round of applause. Such a good presentation, and even if you can't get up to Georgian Bay yourself, you took us through so much of what is so gorgeous and beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I hope it was educational and entertaining, and if not both, then at least one of the two. So enjoy your lunch, and I'm sorry I can't be there to join you in person, but enjoy your lunch, and happy to chat with you again soon someday.